So you're the founder of Andromeda.
My dad was a surgeon. My mom was a researcher. Switched to engineering from pre-med and then ended up deciding to go into MedTech because I still wanted to help patients. I could build things that instead of helping patients one by one directly, could help lots of patients indirectly, hopefully millions or billions even that are falling asleep while we're working. The investors were like, we're done. That's it. Deliver energy to it within 10 milliseconds. Medical device reps were just not very efficient. They thought that this was going to be a job killer. Make sure you really know the person and work together before you jump in as co-founders. 90% of men have it by age 80. The next generation is going to be run by software.
This is Mark Pawlikowski, and welcome to the TechMates podcast, where my partner Henrik and I explore how Kiwi and Aussie founders are reshaping the future and what sets them apart. Henrik and I have been part of successful companies in Silicon Valley and Europe, and now bring that expertise to partner with entrepreneurs in Australasia. By sharing the personal stories of successful Kiwi and Aussie founders and how they got here, we hope to inspire you to dream big. This is TechMates, bringing an outsider's perspective to the stories of those daring to disrupt down under. Let's dive in.
Thank you for joining us on TechMate, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah,
Awesome. So you're the founder of Andromeda, great, really exciting company. You're based in California at the moment, right?
Correct, in the Bay Area.
Yeah, but there is a link to New Zealand, so we're going to discuss that later. But where we'd love to start, and in your particular case, super interesting to hear about your family background. I read somewhere you grew up in a medical family, is that right?
Yeah, so my dad was a surgeon. My mom was a researcher. So very academic, very much in the medical field. So I was planning initially to be a surgeon also, or be a doctor at least, and then ended up finding a different path while I was in college.
Where'd you grow up?
So yeah, I mean, as I was at Stanford undergrad, and so while I was pre-med, I really got sucked in by Silicon Valley and just all the stuff that was being built. It was the time when like Facebook was starting and a lot of the big tech companies, and realized I could without going to medical school and residency and taking all the time to go be a doctor, I could go and build things right away. And so switched to engineering from pre-med and then ended up deciding to go into MedTech because I still wanted to help patients. That was the initial mission that led me to want to be a doctor, and thought I could build things that instead of helping patients one by one directly, could help lots of patients indirectly, hopefully millions or billions even. So went down that path and then ended up getting a job at a MedTech startup after graduating.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. So cool. Yeah. Well, dive into all that. Yeah. What you're building now with Andromeda is a really cool, basically autonomous robotic surgery device. But yeah, where did you like, maybe to begin, where did you grow up? Kind of where did you like, where's your family originally from?
I was on the East Coast of the U.S. Initially, and was born in Durham, North Carolina. My dad was at Duke doing his residency, and then moved around a bit around the East Coast while he was getting different jobs, kind of rising through the ranks as a surgeon. So lived mostly on the East Coast, and then so really wasn't exposed to the Silicon Valley scene much then, being from this academic family that didn't consider startups to be real jobs, and I think they still may not. And then it was very different to come out west. I thought I would go somewhere on the East Coast, but then visited Stanford and really liked what was going on there. I guess I like the Silicon Valley scene, and the weather and the campus kind of sucked me in also. So that was not going to lie, that was a factor also.
What kind of doctor is your dad? What kind of surgeon?
A cardiac surgeon.
Okay, interesting. And so your whole kind of life trajectory was initially thinking you'd become some kind of doctor, or also a cardiac surgeon, or?
Yeah, something. I wasn't sure what kind of doctor. Probably a surgeon, cardiac maybe. Didn't really have a specific specialty I was planning to focus in. Though it's interesting, when I was in high school even, my dad was doing trials with, I think it was with Computer Motion, the competitor to Intuitive at the time. They ended up getting acquired by Intuitive. And so I got to go in and try the robot, and didn't realize the significance of that at the time. It was just a fun thing to play with back then. But then, yeah, I mean, that product category ended up growing a lot between then and when I got into it many years later.
So you were just able to kind of move the joysticks and see the robot move?
Yeah, it was really early back then too. I mean, I think they were just launching this stuff at the time. And so it was a far cry from where it is now. I went into Intuitive's office about a year ago and tried the latest Da Vinci 5 with all the latest bells and whistles, and it's amazing how much more sophisticated it is at this point.
Did your parents also encourage you to become a surgeon as well? Or were they kind of like happy for you to do whatever you want?
I think, I mean, they're pushing down an academic path. They wanted me to become some kind of person that advanced science in the world. That was the value they held. My dad was a surgeon, but also a big researcher. So he was academic his whole career and wasn't in private practice. Did a lot of studies, investigated a lot of new treatments and devices. And so I think both were really set on me following in their footsteps and advancing science in some way. I also thought that would be cool to do, but I think that has been what I've been trying to do in my career, though it's from a very different angle. It's not from, working in some university lab or as a surgeon. It's by building stuff and things that help that, hopefully will help people live better lives.
What was the path? So when you got to Stanford, you already knew you wanted to do startups, or you were still thinking I still might be a surgeon?
I thought I would be a surgeon still. So I didn't really sink in until a couple years in. And then I had to, when you switch to engineering late, there's a lot of credits you need to get. So it was tough to finish everything in time. But yeah, it was about halfway through. I started going to these entrepreneurial, I think it was called Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders Seminar is what Stanford called it. And a lot of founders, came in to talk, or just people that were involved in startups. I got into some classes that I think by happenstance had some element of entrepreneurship in them, and then really found it exciting. And I think that plus working in a medical lab one summer where I was with a bunch of residents who were just miserable all the time and sleep deprived. They were falling asleep while we're working. And yeah, it just didn't seem like the life I wanted or the path I wanted to go down. It would have taken, to be a cardiac surgeon, it would have been 4 years of med school, then probably 9 years of residency. You graduate college at 22, and by 35, you're, if you go straight through, you're a real surgeon. So it was a long time to wait. So I just thought I'd prefer to get started on stuff sooner.
Interesting. And what was, so you initially were majoring in biology, and then you had those couple experiences and were like, I'm going to switch to engineering? Why did you, you realized I'm not going to do medicine, but like, why engineering?
I mean, from just being, deciding I wanted to get into a startup, that seemed like the place to go. So, I mean, to be able to build stuff, if I was going to do that, if I was going to do startups of whether it was MedTech or tech or whatever else, engineering seemed like the best way to be able to get all the skills I needed. If you're not an engineer, then you need someone who is to build stuff, and I'd rather build stuff myself. So I just thought that was the most direct way to do it.
Makes sense.
What was your first job then? What was the startup?
Well, I went to, I guess the first real one, I went to one in Boston, a startup in Boston that was actually not in the medical space. It was in like clean tech. I guess I thought at that point I wanted to try something a little bit different that was still really beneficial for the world, but not medicine, just to see if that would be a fit. And the company, unfortunately, just like folded up really fast. We had one big customer that I think was 80% of our business, and then they dropped us. And then the investors were like, "We're done. That's it." And that was probably, I don't know, 6 to 9 months into working there, and it was shocking. And so then I came back and found my way back to Silicon Valley and worked for a company called EBR Systems that was developing a leadless pacemaker. I've always wanted to do things that are really ambitious projects that could be massively impactful. And so this seemed really, really promising as far as just a much better pacemaker that used a lot of really cool tech to pace the heart. And so, yeah, worked there for 4 years, and then pretty much been in that space and kind of the intersection of MedTech, healthcare, deeptech ever since then.
What is so a pacemaker is, so when your heart makes electrical signals to help it beat, right, on a certain rhythm, and sometimes that rhythm is disrupted. So a pacemaker is a artificial way to do that. So what were they making specifically?
We had, so when you have a normal pacemaker, which basically they give signals to the heart, it's electrical signals. The heart's very electrical as far as the way that it works. The pacemakers, when you don't have the right signals running through your heart to be able to beat correctly, pacemakers help you keep it timed. And traditional pacemakers had been these, big implanted devices that had these wires called leads that had to go through the heart and caused a lot of problems. And we had a little tiny, instead of leads, there was this little tiny receiver that was, centimeter long, and would just embed into the heart wall. And we would take a device, deploy those into the heart, and you didn't need these wires running everywhere from the pacemaker. And then it used ultrasound to basically from a little transmitter that was placed over the ribs to deliver energy between the ribs, because ultrasound can't go through ribs. It's got to go through the space in between. The ribs have air that blocks the signal. And then what I was doing there was I was developing the algorithms to be able to find this thing and deliver energy to it within 10 milliseconds. And sound is not that fast. So 10 milliseconds actually is pretty quick. And so I developed the algorithms that I think are still used today from last I heard in this. And this is back in, this is like 15 years ago. And yeah, then basically reliably has to deliver the signal, or else if you don't find it, then you're not going to allow the heart to, or help the heart beat, which is, if it happens enough, then it's pretty bad. So pretty critical part of the product.
So you basically, so there's a device that's on the outside that actually sends power to continue to, because you need to continuously power it, right? That's sort of the idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Wow. So that's a cool. And how long were you there? How long were you in that company?
4 years, and the company kind of went through a recap of sorts, and so I found myself along with most of the team too on the outside, or without a job. The company, had a few. Actually, it's doing really well now after I think it's been 22 years of operation with a few recaps or bumps along the way. But that was the first one. Then when I was there, I just thought that when things were kind of going in a not good direction, had gone to the leadership and shared my plan to turn things around, and they didn't really take it too seriously because I was like the youngest person of the company, an engineer. I wasn't like a CEO or C-level anything. I was very far from it. So then I came out of that thinking that would have worked. Like my plan totally would have worked and would have saved the company. Probably delusional, but that's what I was thinking, and just said, okay, I need to be a founder now. Enough of this, enough taking orders from somebody and being at the whim of whatever they decide to see if the company succeeds or fails. And so then basically started looking for projects, and ended up through a meetup meeting the people that were my co-founders with NewRep, which was later called Avail.
Wait, Nick, can you tell us more about like this whole story of like you went to the leadership to explain how they should turn the company around? That's a pretty interesting like move. Like, yeah, what, like, I guess what were you seeing, and then what kind of made you think, okay, I know, I have the answers?
Yeah, it's been a long time, so I don't recall the exact points that I made exactly, but we were having trouble in some of our trials, and I think I had some ideas around the product and just some different directions we could go with what we were building. It was very product focused. That's what I was at the time. I'm still kind of product focused, but know the other sides of things now. So it was like, oh, if we do this thing or pursue this product feature, then that would be way better, and we can get around the problems that happen. I think, even to be fair, I think the CEO is a very experienced person that's respected in the industry and has done a lot of great stuff. He probably correctly noted that I was missing several sides of the company that were involved, but it did come down to the product in the end. The product was the reason why the recap happened. I think we could have fixed that, and we had a story for the investors of like, oh, this thing happened, but we have it all figured out. Then maybe we could have raised funding when otherwise it wasn't happening.
But he like at that moment he didn't like okay, well, let me ask the question differently. Like, if you had somebody in your company who came to you and said that, was like, yo, I know exactly what the problems are, and like, here's how you fix them, how would you treat that person?
I think it should always be an idea meritocracy. So that's what I thought at the time. I was thinking, well, it doesn't matter who I am or what his opinion of me is. Like, if I'm, a few years out of college, if I'm an engineer and not a, I don't know, head of some department or whatever else, whatever he would respect. I think here I definitely would hear people out, and we like to hear people out, and just good ideas can come from anybody in the company, and it's not always things that are directly related to the function they serve in the company. So I probably would at least take it more seriously. I mean, this was a like 40-person company, and I'm sure this guy had a lot of stuff to worry about. So maybe it was just a matter of the probability of this being something useful is low enough that I'm going to prioritize it under other stuff I want to do, which is fair. But I like to think that even in a bigger company than that, I would consider, especially if you're up against the wall. When you're up against the wall, you have to try whatever you can. If there's any good idea that can save the company, then I think you have to consider it.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of guts, right? To kind of, a few years out of college, go up to your leadership team and say, hey, like, I know exactly how to do this. Were you kind of confident enough that your plan was right, or were you nervous about that?
Well, yeah, I think I was nervous. I had thought through it a good bit, and it was just like, I think I had my mindset of, okay, this company, something bad's going to happen here with this company. This is not going to go well, and it's just not going to work out for any of us. So I need to do this. If I can help with this situation, that's the best value I can add for the company. Like, over making a slightly better algorithm. The algorithm I was working on was working pretty well at the time. And it was like, okay, over incrementally improving that, I can think about this for a little bit and try to see if I can move the needle on that. And so that was what drove me to go and do it. I mean, the guy was pretty intimidating. He was like probably 60 years old. It was it's MedTech, so people are usually like really experienced and done a lot of things. He'd been, a CEO of a bunch of companies and whatnot. But I think you got to just have the courage to go and do things.
Yeah,
And
no, that's inspiring. And then what was the thesis behind what later became Avail?
Yeah, so we found the need that we realized that medical device reps were just not very efficient in what they did. We were kind of thinking about the costs of medical devices, I think, initially, and what's driving that. And we found that just the sales and support process for devices was adding a lot of cost to things. I mean, whether that was like, I think a lot of that was borne by companies and, made companies less profitable. You couldn't necessarily pass on the savings to hospitals because like reimbursements fixed for a lot of procedures. So we saw that reps were inefficient. They were going to like 2 cases a day, doing, a couple hours of work in a day of 8 hours or 10 hours, and we could make that better. It should be a remote model where it's kind of like a call center and you have reps that are supporting a lot of cases in a day and not just 1 or 2.
Nick, sorry, what is a case and what does supporting a case mean?
Yeah, so when you have a medical device, let's say a knee replacement or a heart valve or something like that, there's a rep that comes with the company. Some people have like reps that are both sales and support, and some have diverged into more of a, like one person does sales, one does support now. And then when there are surgeries with the device, the reps will be there to help with things. Part of what they do is bring the product to the hospital sometimes, but the product can get to the hospital in other ways. The rep doesn't need to be the delivery person also. What we found out was the main thing they were doing was just providing insights on the product during the cases. The surgeon's the expert in the surgery, but the rep is the expert in the product. And so that's necessary for a lot of devices, and it's incredibly costly. I mean, you have people that are being paid, I don't know what reps get paid now. I think it's several $100,000 per year in a lot of cases, but that's going to supporting not that many cases. So you're paying somebody a lot to support not that many cases, and that's really inefficient. So that's one of those things that we thought could either make healthcare less costly and or MedTech more profitable, which it's not that profitable. That's why the space has always been not, the hottest for funding. And so we wanted to do to achieve one of those goals by doing this. And then we also thought, well, for clinical trials, for surgeons, helping other surgeons, this was going to pave the way into eventually anybody porting into a case via video and even doing maybe telesurgery someday. So that was the path we were going. And yeah, I mean, we wanted to start by just helping reps do more cases in a day.
So your customers were the reps?
The customers were the MedTech companies. And so the reps, it's tough. We called it NewRep initially. And we were like, we're going to make you into a new, better rep. But then reps, a lot of them saw that as being, this is going to be the new rep. It's going to replace the reps. And so that was kind of a problem, that they thought that this was going to be a job killer. There were some that were good, that believed they could be that call center rep who's doing 10 cases in a day instead of 2 or whatever it would be. So there were some that were really enthusiastic, and then a lot of them were not and didn't want this to happen because they thought that they were going to lose their job. If you're, the bottom half of reps, then you probably did have reason to worry, to be honest.
Because you're basically like saddling the good ones with more work and probably causing the worst ones to get fired, right? That was like what this thing would do.
Yeah, I mean, more work, and probably they'd make more money too.
I see. Okay, so how did that go?
It's complicated. I mean, yeah, so the company ended up getting to a really good place and launching in over 1,000 centers eventually. I ended up leaving due to just team disputes, and decided to step out and found another company a few years in. And so I left as we were kind of early. We had sold a few and we had raised some funding, but it was still pretty early. And then the person who ended up being the CEO, named Daniel Hawkins, ended up coming in maybe a year after that. And my co-founder, I was actually the CTO who built the whole first product for NewRep/Avail. And my co-founder, who was the CEO, ended up sticking around after Daniel came in and became the CEO, but then left a little bit later. Within several years, none of the founders were involved. And to Daniel Hawkins' credit, he took it through a tremendous growth phase, got into 1,000 hospitals, which is not that easy to do.
Wow.
I think COVID helped a little bit as far as just the need being really pressing for hospitals. At first, they didn't.
Right.
So we needed to sell to MedTech, but then also the hospitals had to sign on. And they realized, I think, when COVID hit, that this is the way they could get the reps out of the hospitals, which they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
be able to do that. I mean, it was the only way they could do that. We were really the first big mover in that space, so it was a great place to be. Now, there's companies now like Proximy that are doing very similar things, but then it was mostly Avail that was out there.
Was it? Was
Then
it
yeah, I
mostly
mean, I
a
think eventually
a software product? Was it mostly a software product?
To be clear, it was mostly software, and then we had a cart in the operating room that had screens and such. So there was a hardware element. It's kind of like my product now with Andromeda, that it's mostly software, but there is a hardware element. But software is the thing that's driving the primary value. And then at some point, and you don't want to speculate, I think I know some of the company ran into financial trouble after seeing incredible growth, and then ended up selling, but it wasn't the best. Wasn't the best sale to Mandera eventually.
Yeah, this was your first company, right? Any big learnings from doing it for the first time, where afterwards you're like, I'm going to do that differently next time?
Yeah, the team's really important. That's the thing I learned from this company. We also, it's crazy. We went into a space that people thought there was no way this could succeed because it should be the model, but there was no way to get the market to move in that direction, which I think it just takes gradual, and then some kind of forcing function like COVID gets it there. So I probably wouldn't have chosen to do that exact company and strategy knowing what I know now. But sometimes you have to be a little bit crazy, and then luck needs to hit at the right time to make that happen. But with the team, though, going back to that, so my co-founders, I still, at least one of them, I think still talk to occasionally. The other one is also a really good guy, but we weren't the best fit as a team. There's a few reasons why it wasn't the best fit, and we didn't get along so well as co-founders. Got great respect for both people that I founded it with, but I think we could have spent more time just vetting out the fit and making sure that it was going to work for all of us. I'm just thinking through the company and how this was what the roles would be and how that would play out.
How did you meet them?
Through meetup.com. So I started going to a bunch of, that time was like when the height of meetup.com, and I was just going to a lot of meetups, try to meet people to found something. That was my primary strategy to found something at the time. I need co-founders. I don't want to do it by myself. I need to figure out what I'm going to work on. I had some ideas, and I was also looking for other ideas. So we all met at a meetup, and then started kind of testing the waters of working together. And then after a month or so, I think it was, we ended up deciding to just do it.
And at the time you just left your previous job. Were you just hanging around like San Francisco and doing this, or what were you? I
was living in San Francisco. Yeah. I had just gotten married. My wife was really hoping I would find something soon, because SF is not an easy place to live.
Get you out of the house.
Yeah. I was also really motivated to do something new that was my own thing. And so that was I was really eager to go out and figure out what that was going to be. So was out at a lot of meetups, working a lot of things, just talking to a lot of people I knew from Stanford or whatever, trying to figure out what was going to be next. It was a fun time looking back at it.
And this learning about co-founders, right? I think there's this crazy statistics about how many companies fail because of that issue, right? Knowing what you know now, and you founded new companies since then, how do you make sure it's the right fit, and how do you vet the relationship and the co-founders you're going into business with?
You've got to make sure you really know the person and work together before you jump in as co-founders. So, my second company I did kind of through Stanford Biodesign, know the person I was founding with. And so that ended up, we had a good sense of each other before we jumped in, and that company I founded right after leaving Avail. And then with Andromeda, we met up through the YC network. We were both YCombinator. We're both YCombinator founders before that. And so that does help when you have a common network and you know some of the same people and they can vouch for the other person. And so that works well. But we spent a lot of time. I think we spent 5 or 6 months working together and meeting up, once a week or more to work on stuff, to brainstorm stuff before we ended up deciding to do it as a company. The more you do this, I think the more you really take the time up front to make sure that it's going to be a good fit. And then I think there's multiple ways that co-founders can be bad fits too. There's a lot of interesting dynamics that can happen.
Any common failure modes?
I think, there's the biggest things. So just being aligned on the vision of what you want to build. If you like this product idea, but one person sees it going in one direction and one sees it going in another direction, like with Andromeda, which is building autonomous surgical robots, maybe one of us would be, and this is not the case, we're both very aligned in reality, but let's say you had somebody that was a MedTech person who wanted to build a robot for one use case and then sell it to Medtronic or whatever. And that's one path. And if somebody, which is more like us, wanted to build something that was bigger than intuitive, that was on the scale like the Tesla of surgical robots, which is basically what we're trying to do, then those are not compatible mindsets, and it's never going to work. Even if some of the early stages are aligned to the same task, like, oh, we need to build a robot, we need to do a clinical trial, we need to get it on the market. You may be aligned on those things, but then at some point it's going to be a problem, and then your story becomes incoherent, and it's tough to, if you talk to an investor, they'll sense that really quickly. And then also just the intensity level. So in prior companies, and I don't want to call out certain people, but some founders, I'm pretty intense as a founder. Like, I like to push hard. I'm working most of the time. And some people want to be founders, but still work kind of don't say 9 to 5, but have an easier work-life balance. And it's tough to be a founder, in my opinion, doing that. Maybe there's some that I know that are wildly successful doing that, and I am wrong. But in any case, you can't be misaligned on those. If one person's pushing crazy hard and one's, enjoying their life and taking a lot of vacation and whatever, then that's not going to work either. So the intensity level's got to be the same. And then I think, as far as managing the team, that's also important, where you're going to give an incoherent message to the team. If you either have different intensity levels that are wildly off, and one person thinks, you should be staying all night in the office, and one person thinks everyone should go home at 5, or if you have different visions for the company.
Well, what about interpersonal things and conflict resolution, how you deal with issues? Some people are good communicators, some people are could be passive aggressive, right? Do those things, do you think those things are important? Because the ones you mentioned are more around just how you see the company developing.
Well, there's the kinds of, there's founder dynamics that work or don't work, and then there's tactics for making it work. And I think people that are good communicators probably are more likely to make it work. Maybe that's obvious, but it's really important to keep that communication channel open. If you start to diverge, and I think in my first company that did happen, where we started to diverge and just didn't want to deal with it. It's easy to avoid conflicts. The conflicts are unpleasant and nobody wants to have tough conversations. But if you avoid those, then issues start to build up, and then it gets to a point that it's unsustainable before you even maybe realize it. Mm-hmm. And so now with Andromeda, now that I'm 3 companies in, I think I got a little better with each company. We are willing to say whatever. I mean, we're willing to lay the unpleasant opinions out there and just have those conversations, and at least once a week. And then there's a lot of informal, just in the office discussions we kind of catch up for multiple hours and just talk through whatever was going on.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Company number 2.
Company number 2, exactly. So ZenFlow, what was the thesis behind it and how did it go?
Yeah. So I had co-invented a device for enlarged prostate, or BPH. It's when the prostate grows in older men, and something that all men get eventually. So 90% of men have it by age 80, and half have it by age 60. So we had developed a little stent-like device, or we called it the spring. It looked like a spring. It was kind of a coily device that was going to hold back the prostate when it was blocking the flow of urine. We thought this would be a better solution, less invasive, and still pretty effective versus other things in the market, and decided to do it as a company. By this point, I had built a better network, and I had advisors that were both, I guess, founders, CEOs, VCs, people at Stanford Biodesign. I got involved there. And they just said, don't do this. It's not going to work. We actually like your idea a lot, but this team as founders is not going to be able to make it happen, because this is going to require $100 million in 10 plus years to market. And you are not a team that could raise that. MedTech's really tough. There's only a few investors that could even fund a company. And there are only maybe 10 people that could build this kind of company and raise the funding that are needed. And they're definitely not you. So and then I went to my co-founder after that meeting that was with a very prominent person that had built a lot of things. And so they were very credible. And they had told us there was 5 investors in MedTech. And I told my co-founder, at the time, I remember saying, it was there's a lot of old men in the world, and a lot of them have prostate problems, and investors in general are disproportionately older men. So we need to just go to enough of them until we can raise the money we need to at least get to the point that the VCs will fund us. And that's where we started. And then we started doing that. So, I mean, a lot of our, I don't want to call them old or different. We had a lot of, men of a certain age that angel invested early on. And we also, I think the big break that happened, well, we got into StartX. I know, Mark, you were involved with StartX too, which was great. Avail, NewRep was also in StartX. And so it was, I think, a little easier to get in. So that really helped. We got in right after we had founded the company. Even better in terms of like actually getting some funding, we got into Y Combinator, which was crazy. And everyone told us it was crazy to even apply because we were a MedTech company. We had a like implantable class 3 device. And so YC's funding like Reddit and Dropbox and stuff like that at the time. And this is not in their wheelhouse whatsoever. But we saw something on the website that, like medical devices look kind of interesting or something like that on the YC website, and said, well, they've never funded one, but maybe we'll be the first. And then turned out we were.
Which partner did that?
I think Sam Altman had written it. I think he was the CEO then. So he might have been the one who wrote it. But it was the interview. Paul Buchheit was our like primary partner there. And he's incredibly helpful with ZenFlow. He's somebody I've gone back to even since leaving and founding this company. But I remember at the end of the interview, he asked me how much time and money will it take to get this to market? And I was like, he's going to hate this answer. Like I need to lowball as much as I can. I need to give the absolute best case. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to give something crazy that I think he'll like. And I was like 4 years and 20 million or something like that. And I was like, well, that's super lean and super cheap. And he's like, oh, that's a lot. And it's like, okay, we lost it there. That was the end. But then we got the call later to get in. I don't know what went through his head to decide to fund us, but somehow,
and you ended up raising much more than that, right?
It was a very low ball. Like that would have been insane. I don't think anybody gets implantables to market in less than 10 years is rare, and less than 100 million is rare. And so that was
Paul,
it was very
just for context, that was the guy who created Gmail and sold it to Google.
Yeah. So he created Gmail and the like "Don't be evil" slogans. It's good. I mean, I like people that don't want to be evil. And so he was a big early Google employee, and he had somehow been assigned like the healthcare person. There was healthcare stuff that was happening at YC, though not any MedTech until our batch.
Yeah, but he was when we made these computers for kids, he bought some for his kids, and we had some interactions with him based on that. Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah, he's great. He's a great guy, and he really, despite not being in healthcare or MedTech at all, like he really got it. Like he got it way better than you would expect someone from that background to get it.
Yeah, that's cool.
And what was YC like? I mean, you were there in 2015, right? So 10 years ago. Yeah. Now I think it's a super well-known brand around the world. Everybody wants to get in. It's like they run, I think, I don't know how many cohorts every year, but I suppose it was much smaller 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, that was like halfway between YC starting and now. So it was probably halfway from where it was when it was like a few people working with Paul Graham over the summer to now where it's 4 batches a year and I don't know, thousands of companies per year. So we had I think about 110 or 120 companies in our batch. It was pretty big. It wasn't as big as it is now. When I went through again in 2023, it felt bigger for sure. I mean, I knew almost every company in my batch in the first go around and definitely didn't the second time, but it was really helpful. So we got into YC and everybody, our MedTech advisors said, well, they don't know anything about MedTech and it's totally different. So nothing's going to be relevant, but a lot of it was. So a lot of the principles that underlie this stuff made a lot of sense for MedTech. When you think about it, a lot of the same underlying philosophies about building products that users like do apply no matter what you're building. But I think in MedTech, there's this belief that there's a certain established playbook and you should follow that and not deviate, that people will figure out how to get MedTech products to market. And that's very different from getting, Reddit to market. And so you need to follow a different pathway. But we found that that was not correct, that a lot of the same principles apply.
Yeah. And now they're obviously much more open to do MedTech, so you kind of broke the ice there a little bit.
Well, I would say for a while they were. Now there's not much MedTech getting funded anymore because it didn't produce the best returns, I think, and MedTech is tough, and so it's kind of waned. It became a really big thing for a while, though. Probably 4 or 5 years after we went through, it was at its peak, and then it fell off a little bit since then.
I mean, your experience, I mean, sounds like it's been pretty tough, right? Like, with all the companies you've done to date, except for maybe Andromeda, like they've all had some tough like outcome that wasn't like it was a lot like a long timeline, and like I had a couple of recaps and etc. The first one shut down, so I guess it makes sense, right? Well, why is that? Like,
that's been the experience for YC, and I mean either people have had a tough run and there's been down rounds or whatever, or they just didn't raise funding at all in the beginning. And like a demo day, companies would go through and most companies would raise a few $1 million, and then the MedTech companies would get 100K or whatever, and that it was just tough to get going.
So what's the kind of reason for that? Like, why is this industry so hard to raise money for, like, doesn't produce as good of outcomes? Is there some structural things there?
Yes. So there are some structural things for sure. I mean, it's a tough space because it does take all these. So you have to incur all these additional costs of getting products to market, how long it takes and how much it costs. You don't really get compensated for that on the back end. The acquisitions that happen by the strategic players in this space, as opposed to pharma, let's say, where you can get bigger, earlier exits, they're not that big usually, and they're very late. And so you're a lot of the value accrues to the bigger players and not to startups. Just, I don't know why that's the way that it is. I think it's a conservative space in general. And then I think there's a lot of playbook that doesn't necessarily need to be the way it is. I mean, there's ways you can move faster. I think a lot of it's just picking the right project. Implantable devices are tough. Although it would have been tough to be that much faster. We could have been maybe a little faster, but being that much faster would have been challenging. There's always just the uncertainty of what happens when a new device interfaces with the human body. There's always surprises. And when it's implantable, then you've got to wait a long time to learn those things, because usually you've got to see how it goes in patients over like a year to get the signal. Then you have to go back and try to get closer to the mark and try another study. And then usually it's like 3 stages. Usually there's like a first in human, a pilot, and then what's called pivotal study, where it's a big randomized study and you feel like you have a good sense of how the device is going to perform by then. But those stages can take forever, and they also cost a lot. I mean, a lot of these pivotal studies, the big randomized studies with 300 patients, cost tens of millions to run and take years. So that in itself is tough to stomach.
Nick, do you feel that, like, this whole, like, implantable physical device implanted in the body is a like, broad scheme, like technology development is like a temporary stage where at some point we'll be able to grow any organ or any tissue, like from your stem cells, and just implant like completely biocompatible your own organ with the same kind of DNA as you have at some point in the future?
I think so. I have no doubt that's going to happen. And I guess as a caveat, the existence of a human level or superhuman AI who knows what's going to happen with this? It could happen a lot faster. Absent that, it's decades away to be able to actually do that. So there's still a long time we're going to have to do other stuff and be implanting devices unless AI totally changes the game, which I would say I would assign a decent probability of that happening. But otherwise, it'll be a while. We're a long way from that happening. There are a lot more like cell therapy, gene therapy products that are coming out, which is kind of the bridge to get to that point. So it's moving in that direction. You've got, CRISPR and other things that can do crazy things with the body, though they're still in their infancy, and they are bound by the laws of clinical trials too. And it just takes a long time for whether it's a medical device or biologic or drug, like those all take forever to prove out. There is some movement on that too. There's things like, organoids and other, I'm not in the pharma space, but I've, read a few things about ways you can do preclinical tests a little bit easier than what's being done now. Maybe that will help. And AI tools for drug development, for sure. There's a lot of AI tools that help with drug discovery now. For medical devices, it's still, MedTech always lags behind everything else by a decade or so, but maybe there'll be ways to simulate devices in the body before too long too. But I think it is shifting towards, I think, instead of implants, that biologics may be better. I have a friend, and I don't want to call the company out, but there's a friend where both the founders are very successful. Prior founders, one from MedTech, one from tech. They kind of started with an implantable concept for a very big need, and then ended up moving towards more of a biologic in the end. So I think that's probably the more fruitful ground to go after when you're talking about those kinds of therapies.
Interesting. Yeah. I wonder why the founders, I guess, why, yeah. Like, what is, if the market structurally is so kind of unfavorable because of all these, again, upfront costs, time, capital, getting diluted out, and then you don't get compensated on the back end. Why? What makes a founder start a company in that space? Is it just like, I don't know, because to your point, right? You could focus on maybe some other part of the stack or some part in kind of the biology, medical stack. What's the motivation, I guess?
I'd say first of all, a lot of people are driven by wanting to solve diseases. And some people are much more mechanically inclined than like biologically. And so if you're a mechanical engineer and you have that mission, then MedTech is kind of the way to go. And I think people, once you get in the space, then you're comfortable in that space, and people don't really move around between even MedTech and biopharma that much. There are some exceptions that I know. I think people should be able to. People should really take more risks and step outside their comfort zone more. A lot of people don't want to. A lot of people are just, it's what they know, and they feel like they have a good idea that could get there and could deliver value to patients, so they do it. And people don't always know ahead of time too. There's a lot of these, Stanford Biodesign has inspired hundreds of programs all over the world that are around medtech innovation. And so you go to one of these and you're like, this seems cool. You don't know what the market's like. You don't know it's that tough of a space to raise funding in and to build a company in. And then you have an idea and like, oh, I'm going to try to commercialize this. And then you run into the buzzsaw of what medtech is. But then you're far enough along that you want to keep doing it.
So what was the outcome of ZenFlow? Where is it now? I think you exited it in 2022.
Well, maybe before that also, what was the product? Like what exactly was the product and how did it work?
Yeah, so we had this stent-like product. I mean, this spring that opened up the prostate and helped people pee better. So the prostate, blocks the flow of urine. Then you push it aside and it can flow. And a man who's 70 can hopefully pee like a 30-year-old after getting this. So we took it through all the stages of trials. We went down to New Zealand as one of our first places we did trials, and that was in 2016 was the start of my long and very close relationship with New Zealand. It's been almost 10 years now. I've been going down there regularly, and so we did trials in New Zealand and the US and a bunch of other countries. While I was there, I think we treated probably close to a couple hundred patients. And now at this point, so I ended up leaving as we were kind of wrapping up the pivotal study enrollment, like the big randomized study. And then we were going to have to wait for all the data to come in and then the FDA clearance and all that. And it takes a long time. So left the company then and founded Andromeda, but it's still going. And hopefully we'll get to market fairly soon.
Nick, maybe just quickly on the prostate piece. Wait, so can you tell us more about, because Andromeda is also focused on the prostate. What exactly is the problem with the prostate? Initially, when men get older, and why was that also why is that an area of interest for you?
Well, when I was at Stanford, I got Stanford Biodesign. I kind of got into this urology area just by happenstance. I mean, they challenged me to go find some needs in urology, and so then started talking to a lot of urologists and understanding the lay of the land there. And it turned out they really were, so a couple things are really cool about urology. One is that the urologists are really tech adopters. Among surgeons, they really like new tech. And then there are also a lot of big needs that are really underappreciated. So
wait, why are they tech adopters?
I think, my theory behind this is that they were the first to get Da Vinci, the robot from Intuitive. So a lot of urologists, once they've started using that, they called themselves robotic surgeons. And so it became part of who they were, that they were robotic. And then that kind of led to adopting a lot of different tech. And then, so we had a lot of people that were really into robots. For ZenFlow, I didn't care about whether they liked robots, but now I do, of course. And that's part of why we started in that space, because a lot of them really see robots as a core part of who they are. And then there's also just a lot of needs that lend themselves well. It's kind of like a plumbing problem, right? With urology, a lot of this stuff is plumbing, or there's bad things that you can burn or cut out or freeze or do a lot of different things to. There's a lot of device solutions you can come up with for urology. Then there's a lot of big markets too. So you've got things like BPH, or enlarged prostate, when the prostate grows, but it's not cancerous. That happens in all men. And then in a large percentage of men, they also get cancerous growth or prostate cancer, which is also a huge market. And then you've got kidney stones, which again affect millions of people per year, I think, in the US. And so a lot of big opportunities that are pretty tractable from a device standpoint. When you think about these problems, then a lot of solutions come to mind of things you could possibly do. So it's been a big space for innovation, even though it's not the sexiest space. You think about neurosurgery or heart surgery get a lot more people trying to do things. So it feels like it's not as crazy competitive as those spaces.
And tell us about the prostate. So what are the problems that happen with it? So I guess you're saying for ZenFlow, the problem was it would contract, and so you put a stent to
it grows. Then basically so the prostate's constrained by this capsule on the outside, so it doesn't grow out; it grows also in. And then when it grows in, then it blocks off the urine flow. And then there's a lot of things you can do. You can cut out the prostate, or you can stent it. You can burn it and hope that it kind of falls out on its own. You can block the arteries to reduce the blood flow, and that maybe will shrink it. You can drug it in different ways. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. So ZenFlow was trying to mechanically push it open. And then, for Andromeda, we looked at we looked at urology and other spaces too, and found that there was another angle on the prostate that was a promising angle for us to start with this product. So ZenFlow was a company that was about urology, about the prostate. That was what the company was, whereas Andromeda is much more than that. This is our starting point, but then there's a lot more we want to do beyond that. Where in 10 years, I don't think anyone will see us as a prostate company.
Yeah, so maybe we can start with where the thesis on Andromeda in the beginning when you started it. What was the grand vision and where did you get started?
So it's interesting. My co-founder and I had the same concept and roughly the same concept independently before we met. And so we had both thought about autonomous surgical robots from different life experiences. We've been led to this point. And so for him, he built the first autonomous truck that ever drove on a freeway without a person. And then he also, like myself, had some tough experiences where we both had companies that got to a really good, like high valuation, great point. In my case, it was two different companies that both did that. And then, it wasn't necessarily a smooth path to the goal line from there. And then for him, he also had a situation where this company was super hyped up, did great things, but then didn't work out in the end. So yeah, he had thought about, okay, what else can I do? I've tried the autonomous driving thing. He's a robotics background, a lot of autonomy work. Then was thinking, okay, where else can we replace human labor with robotics and autonomy that's going to be valuable? And he had thought that surgery is a really fruitful place to do that this is a place that autonomy can add a lot of value. And then I had thought about just all the problems I had seen. I'd probably been in hundreds of operating room cases, different companies, and being in labs and whatever over my years, and just said a lot of things go wrong in surgery. And as a meta need, we should do something that causes there to be fewer complications. I had also kind of seen Waymo's launch right before this, and Tesla was building self-driving, and just thought that this is actually an easier problem. Surgery is a lot easier than driving. It's a more constrained environment. Yes, there's anatomic variability. There's more than most people think, actually, in the anatomy variation from one person to the next. But still, the world has a lot fewer features than the driving world, which is basically you can counter anything that exists in the whole world, really, when you're driving. And then there are other agents that are acting against you when you're driving too. There's a lot of other drivers. There's all kinds of pedestrians and bikers and animals and whatever else might get in your way, and construction, and it's endless number of things. But surgery was easier. And so I had thought about, okay, this technology exists, we can build this, and it would solve these problems that I'm always seeing in the operating room and make surgery much better and have a huge impact on human life. So we met up and had both been thinking about this, and then decided to brainstorm on it. We met up through the YC network. And when we looked into this, we basically realized that we were convinced this is definitely going to happen. Like, if we don't build this company, we will see somebody start this company in the next 10 years, if not sooner, and it's going to be huge. It's bigger, like what Intuitive is now, which is worth almost 200 billion now. This could be a lot bigger than that, because this is going to add a lot more value. The Intuitive robot is great. I mean, it adds a lot of physical value to surgeons, but adding the cognitive assist is much more impactful. You can potentially allow surgeons to do a lot more procedures in a day. So that's adding value, to hospitals, and then also have much better outcomes. And so that's, adding value to the patients. And then there's a lot of value to the surgeon as well.
And
so
what does Intuitive do, just for context?
So their main product is the Vinci robot, which is I think it's 4-arm abdominal surgery robot that does a lot of the abdominal procedures, like prostatectomies is one that urologists do. And then you can do gallbladders and other things that are happening in that part of the body.
Right. And how does it sort of help? Like, why do surgeons use it? So this is, got a picture of it here. So what is it? Yeah. How does it help?
Yeah. I mean, it's, so it makes the procedure physically easier. It allows them to be, they basically control, it doesn't really change the controls that much. You use the controls in this little console, and then you can do the procedures, in the body with these arms through the robot.
So
and it does. One reason it does help is you don't have to cut. Like, it replaces a lot of open procedures, at least initially did. So where people would cut into the abdomen, now they can use these different robotic arms to do it instead. So there's always a lot of criticism that Da Vinci doesn't improve outcomes. Now it's been shown it does improve outcomes in certain procedures. Though there's a lot more it's only scratching the surface of what you could do with an autonomous robot.
And this is what the surgeon actually does. Surgeon's actually just sitting there.
They're in the console. Yeah, they're in this console and they're operating through that. And these little actuators they have mimic the tools they would already use for what's called laparoscopic surgery, which is there's a non-robotic version where they have these tubes going through the abdomen that's not open. It's not cutting through. You're using these little tubes. And in those laparoscopic procedures, the surgeons manipulate these little controllers that are kind of like what the Da Vinci robot has. So there is some precedent for this not being robotic, though. With the robotic system, they get really good, dexterity and then also good visualization.
I see. So you're saying laparoscopy, you're actually manipulating the tool yourself with your hand versus this. There's like you're kind of disconnected from the actual like things you're manipulating.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. Okay, and you're saying
this is a mainstay in most major hospitals in the U.S. and a lot of the world. I mean, this is everywhere now.
And you were saying this is great, but like let's add some intelligence to it or something. Is that right?
Yeah. So in what we realize that the physical challenges of surgery are not limiting the outcomes that much. It's why Da Vinci, though it has shown some outcome improvement, has not shown a lot. That there's a lot more you could get from using AI to assist surgeons. And I think everybody, even intuitive, understands that. Most people think that it's 20 years away that we're going to be able to do this. But, as we've talked about, you can build it now. And so that's what we're doing. We just said, we've got a great opportunity to build this now. The technology is definitely there. MedTech is always 10 years behind. And so we have 5-10 year head start on when this probably would be built otherwise. And so we should just do it. And let's do it as fast as we can. And just try to expand autonomy and expand the number of procedures we offer as fast as possible.
And then you basically went back to Y-Combinator and you were like, I know how much you love MedTech. Here's another one for you. And they said, great.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we had a different story. So it probably helped to have been a prior YC founder. And, the partner who was running MedTech then and left recently to found a great company, Surbi Sarna, was a good friend of mine from before when she was at YC. So we had known each other for a long time, and she was running the healthcare thing, and we were kind of MedTech, but not really. We were a lot more. The essence of who we are is much more of a deep tech company than a MedTech company. I think I'm the only one on the full-time team that's worked at a MedTech startup before this, so very different in terms of who we are. And we also are just looking a lot bigger and doing things very differently from what MedTech companies do. So I think because we operate in a very YC-like way, whereas MedTech companies usually don't. And then we have this really big vision to totally transform how surgery is being done, that it's a company that could be a lot bigger in scale than what MedTech companies usually offer. It's not a single procedure device. It's something that could span across dozens of surgeries.
Nick, but like wouldn't it make sense to just develop the software and then just sell it to Da Vinci? Why develop your own robot and give it the ability to actually do surgery?
I mean, you could do that. I think there are companies trying to do effectively that right now. And when you're a software only company, then you have limitations. You can't really be the master of your own destiny. You have to ride on somebody else's hardware. And it's probably Da Vinci if you're trying to build this for Da Vinci. And so, you've got to work through that. We also thought that maybe the company that built the last generation of this, Intuitive, by the way, is an incredible company. I have tremendous respect for them. I think they're the best MedTech company in terms of operating by a long shot. But they may not be the company that's the best fit to build the next generation of surgical robots. They pioneered the space, but I think the way they're set up now is not ideal for building autonomous robots. And we felt like we had a different mindset, different insights that were going to lead us to be able to build that. And it's crazy. You have to be a little crazy to try to do this. But we feel like their approach is not perfectly suited to this next generation as much as it is for the first generation. And we would love nothing more than to build that next generation, not just build some part of it and then flip it to Da Vinci. That could be okay, but we think this is much better. You can always shape how the future looks, which is in my opinion, one of the most exciting things when you're founding a company.
What were your insights? Like, what were your insights that you mentioned? You have insights and you have an approach that's different. Like, what did you, tell us more about what's your unique perspective on the world for how you think about Andromeda and why it'll succeed.
I think one thing is the MedTech playbook is not the right one for this, that it's not always ideal. I think, and this all gets to it being more of a software problem, that the next generation of robots, the first generation hardware was a big part. Da Vinci's hardware is really impressive. They built an incredible robot from a physical standpoint, but the next generation is going to be run by software. That's going to be where most of the value comes from. And you shouldn't build that product in the same way that you built the first hardware focused version. So yeah, I mean, as far as that, we're not doing disposables for one thing. So everybody in robotics thinks that's a dumb idea, or almost everybody does, because everybody makes money off disposables. You can charge them $2,000 or whatever you want to do per case. And so are we leaving money on the table? Maybe. We think it's a better move in the long run, though, that if we deliver the same value to a hospital, they should be able to pay the same amount, whether it's with disposables or with a software subscription. So we're hypothesizing that you don't need disposables being, I guess, to be clear, for people that are not in the space, the end effectors of the robot that actually do the procedure, they clamp onto the robot and then that does a certain surgery. So we don't make those. We just use off-the-shelf tools, which also means we don't have to go through the development process of developing those tools. We don't need to build our own scope or our own laser or our own scissors or whatever else you would use for surgery. That's been done. People have built great tools. We're partnering with a few companies that build scopes and lasers, and theirs are great. We don't need to try to me too on what they've done. So we can work with them and they can also help us get into the market. And then we don't need to build this whole manufacturing business that does all these per case disposables that end up getting thrown in the trash and it's, not good for the planet and all of that. It's an inefficient business model. And so even if it seems like a counterintuitive business model, we're not going to do that. And we're really going to focus on building the software and building towards autonomy. I mean, one thing too, I guess there's a inherent or perceived value to being pre-revenue or not just going after revenue in tech sometimes. But in MedTech, a lot of people have launched robots and tried to scale revenue as fast as possible. That's been their primary metric. And we're also not focused on that. What we want to do is launch a first generation that's not autonomous in the beginning. It's kind of like with Tesla when they launched the car, and the car collects data to build the autonomy. We're going to sell it for revenue. People will pay for it, but we're not maximizing revenue. We want to maximize utilization, learning, data, and user experience. So we want to build something that we have confidence that surgeons really love, and it's getting us loads of data to build autonomy. And then the autonomy feature is the be all end all for this company. That's what we're trying to build. And so we want to optimize to get there. We don't want to, MedTech investors often want us to scale up that first version and just say, you can build a robot. It's a procedure you're doing. The robots are a good use case for this. So you could make money with that. Why don't you just build that? And then you can sell it to Intuitive or J&J or whoever else would be a buyer. You could just do that. But again, I think we see a much bigger company being possible to build here. And we want to go in that direction as fast as we can. We're going much faster than MedTech companies do. So we're going to be on the market, all goes well, should be this year. And that'll be the fastest for any robot so far. And then we want to keep moving at that pace. And we're trying to move it. So far, it's been about 4 or 5x the speed and 10x. That's less cost than your average robot company. So we want to keep that pace up as much as we can.
But like, why wouldn't a surgeon just use an existing robot?
We're starting with a procedure that they don't have a robot for. So that's one thing. We found a need. There's this procedure called HoLEP, holmium laser enucleation of the prostate, that's growing incredibly fast. It's for enlarged prostate too, and it's the best solution. If you have enlarged prostate, BPH, this will solve it. All the enlarged tissue comes out and you're set. For the rest of your life, you're fine. You're never going to have the problem again. It's the only procedure that really offers that and is not super invasive. So this is growing because the outcomes are so good. And by the way, this was created in New Zealand, down in Tauranga, where we're working with a surgeon named Peter Gilling there, who's probably now one of the top, maybe the top urologist in the world. So he's made a big name for himself, and a lot of it was inventing this procedure. And while it's already growing fast, we want to make this the gold standard, or it already probably is, but make that happen faster where everybody's doing it. And it's easier because the procedure is hard to learn, which is the one drawback is that it's hard to learn, takes a lot of training. So we want to make that much easier. Our first generation has basically a robot where you control with an iPad, and then it's like Google Maps for the prostate, where you have this mapping guidance that tells you where you are so you don't get lost. Right now, when you're learning, you get lost a lot and it takes a lot of time and you can mess up. So we're trying to prevent that. And then that, of course, is a vehicle like the Teslas that were sold earlier, or I guess are still being sold now, that are helping us get to the autonomy stage faster. A lot of people say that Intuitive's the only one positioned to build autonomy because they have so much data coming from robots in the field. So we need to find a way to bootstrap ourselves to the data that we need.
And so once you do that for this procedure, you'll have self-driving for this procedure. How do you go to other procedures, right? Because like the data from the procedure doesn't translate into like heart surgery or some other type of surgery?
We want to move fast. So we're parallel processing, and we're starting with urology, where there's other procedures in urology that we can do, prostate cancer, bladder cancer, stones, biopsy, so on. And we are investigating some of those in parallel with launching this. So we're going to launch to hospitals, then have, while they're using it for this HoLEP procedure, also be investigating other use cases and collecting data for those. Hopefully our FDA clearance, if all goes according to plan, we're in the process now, will allow us to do a broad range of urologic activities or procedures. And so we should be able to do some studies for those. If not, we can just, submit for a study. But we want to use the same platform to study those and then just add on procedures really fast while we're also building autonomy in parallel. So it's expanding in two different dimensions at the same time. And then, in a few years, we want to be beyond urology, going into other spaces and occupying a lot of the procedures, the surgeries that Da Vinci is not doing. That's really where we're starting. So Da Vinci is not a competitor, at least not for the time being.
One of the big hurdles, I guess, you always have to overcome as a company like yours is the FDA approval, right? And you've been incredibly fast with this company. Is there any kind of tips, learnings for other folks who are trying to get through that process?
Yeah, it always is challenging. I think founders and FDA are always not completely in sync. It's good. So FDA, I've always found them to be really reasonable as far as the stuff they have. So it all makes sense. It makes sense. And often you want to believe that you don't need something that FDA wants, but there's usually a reason for it. Sometimes it's just as simple as there are regulations and that's what it is. So they have to enforce the regulations. Some tests may not make sense, but if it's in the regulations, then it is. Other times they really are looking out for the best patient outcomes. And I think you need to be honest with yourself and put yourself in FDA shoes. And if you don't really know how they think, then get somebody who does and just pressure test your story. Because a lot of times fighting battles, like if you want to do a smaller study or not do a certain test and you fight that with FDA over multiple cycles, which take, a few months each time, you probably could have just done the test and gotten the data in that time and just gotten through. Being honest with yourself and trying to put yourself in their shoes is good. And then just being collaborative. Like they're good people. I really have enjoyed my interactions with FDA with multiple companies now. And you're not adversaries. It's not them. It shouldn't be about them gatekeeping you and trying to kill your company or whatever you think they're doing. You both should be on the same mission of getting something to patients as fast as possible that's going to improve their outcomes. So that's the end of the day, that's what it is, and you shouldn't be adversarial working with them. For us, though, it's worth noting, though, even though we're going through FDA, we're also going to be launching in New Zealand and possibly other countries. So making FDA not as much of a gatekeeper is also a good idea. If you can have other pathways to do clinical studies or to be on the market, then that can also reduce the risk of FDA. So if we anticipate, even if FDA, even in a worst case, if we didn't get cleared till next year, let's say, then we would still go to New Zealand or go to other countries and launch this anyway. So that's
sort of why
one
you've
thing
been to New Zealand so many times for all your companies, because you've been doing clinical trials and you can get to market faster in New Zealand than in the US.
Yeah, the process is really, really straightforward to get on the market there. And it's a great place for trials in general. I advise everybody to go there. They have a really efficient process for getting trials through. And then there's, in this case, the top expert in the world is there. So that helps. And it's a nice place. I always enjoy just being there too. It's a great place to go. There's a lot worse places you could go for trials.
And Nick, but one question that I have is why wouldn't Intuitive be the best one or best position to do this, given that they do have all the data in the world? It's kind of like, like with Tesla, right? Like you're sort of the Tesla, but or actually, I don't know, I'm trying to think who had, Google had a lot of image data, right? From just people, from indexing the web and then having YouTube. They had all this data. In some ways, I don't know if they played a role in getting Waymo kind of approved and driving, autonomously much earlier than Tesla.
Yeah.
And then Tesla had cars that were collecting data earlier than Google. It feels like they could just at some point, if they really wanted to, in a year, flip a switch, take all that data and just have a product that would probably be miles and miles.
Well, I wouldn't say, but they're not really set up as a company to be able to do that. It's not it's an unnatural thing for them to build. They'd have to kind of retool and refocus. One thing Intuitive's doing so well with the business they have, my read is not that high of a priority to build this, because betting the whole company on this new direction, you could, but then you can also just kind of stay the course and keep growing the revenue and stock price and all that and make the investors happy. They could they do it? Yes, I think they could do it. And they could probably, they're not the same kind of company. They're not set up in the same way we are, so they could probably move half as fast, I would think. They are still tied to this disposables model. I don't see them moving away from that. There's certain things that they're inherent to intuitive, and then just the fact they're a big company and they're constrained by their own quality system and procedures and all that. That's why I say they could do it half as fast. They really committed to it. They also think the other thing besides that, so they could move into that space, but then there's a lot of surgeries that are not in now. And there's only so much they can do. So they could go into every surgery, but then again, it'd be spreading themselves too thin. They want to focus on building value more gradually and expanding their offerings more gradually. So all these surgeries Intuitive's not doing, they have no data on. And so what we're doing in HoLEP, they have no data on HoLEP. We actually already have the biggest HoLEP data set. We actually collected thousands of HoLEP videos to start, and then we've done 22 cases so far. So that's 22 more than any robotic company has done. So that's a head start in this procedure. And then there's a lot of other places we can go really fast and collect data and build that moat, and then be the one that people are trying to catch up to. And if we're moving the fastest, then if they try to catch up, then they'll only fall farther behind. So we want to occupy the space Intuitive doesn't, and build the best product we can. And then maybe there'll be a day that we have autonomous robots for all these procedures and they have autonomous robots for all these procedures, and we'll see who wins the battle royale at the end. But, we're optimistic to build a lot.
Do you
in the
think,
meantime.
do you think we'll have robots that just do surgery? Like, what do you think medicine will look like 10, 20 years from now? Do you think it'll be just you coming in and maybe do you actually even need people at any point in the entire process?
I think, there's a question of whether you need any of us to do any job at any point. There's some point where maybe we all get replaced no matter what we're doing.
But let's say technology doesn't progress beyond what we have today. Given what you have today, if you just had an infinite amount of resources to just develop the stuff you need to do and get the data, do you feel you can make every surgery just fully autonomous?
The goal is to build in that direction. We don't think we are anywhere near the point that there wouldn't be a surgeon in the room. So yeah, we're not trying to displace surgeons. We're trying to make surgeons better. I think it'll keep moving in that direction where a lot of things in general are more autonomous. So will there be a day when surgery as well as everything else are done by robots and AI? Probably. How far away is that? It's hard to say. But we can add a lot of value. I think that's not really the question that's most important. That getting it to 80% autonomous where surgeons still do a few of the things is not necessarily that much less valuable than making it 100%. There's a lot of issues that come with getting that last 20% too. The thing with autonomy, and I think my co-founder has written essays on this, that there's getting that last little bit. Usually the cost is not worth it. It costs more than it's worth to get from 90% to 100%. Getting from 0 to 10 or 10 to 20 is much, much easier. Do we make that final step? It's hard to say, but it doesn't really matter that much in the long run. Where we're going, even with mostly autonomous procedures, is already really exciting. It's already going to make surgeons way better in every case and doing many times more cases per day. So that in itself is exciting.
Well,
getting to infinite surgery.
One of the reasons that I ask is because I think that the majority of the world doesn't have access to the best surgeons, right? Majority of the world is actually is not most people just suffer through a lot of these diseases. We have the luxury in the US and New Zealand and other Western countries to get a enlarged prostate removed or shrunken or whatever. But in most parts of the world, that's not even a thing. They can either A, diagnose or B, treat. So there's just a ton of human suffering that you could alleviate if you could actually create. And I assume the market for that is many, many times larger than just the US or the Western market, right? How do you think about that?
In terms of number of patients, yes. There's, and that should be what we focus on, and not the dollars of can this place pay for a robot? We definitely want to do that. That's one thing. We're trying to expand the reach of surgeon labor, both, it's going to be both, in terms of doing procedures faster, and then just geographically being able to do this remotely. There will be a remote element, whether we partner with someone like Savato, who does, remote telesurgery now, or do something ourselves, yet to be seen. But yeah, that is a goal. We want to expand the reach of the best surgeon to everybody in the world. So right now, there's a tremendous variation in what surgeon you get. I've had one surgeon in my life, and the person who did it was their first day as a surgeon. I'm sure they're a good surgeon by now. This is 10 years ago, but they just come off the flight from med school, and this is their first thing. And that person's not going to be as good as the expert. Yeah, that's kind of the delta we want to close. And so we want to basically get anybody, no matter what rural part of what continent you're in, that you can get access to the best care. And then whether it's done by AI completely or a remote surgeon plus AI, maybe one of those.
It's a very exciting mission. And maybe to wrap up, like, what are the milestones people should look out for? What's in the cards for you in the next 1 or 2 years?
I mean, definitely launching the product is one thing. Launching it for those people in New Zealand, we'll be down there a lot. We're going to get this on the market there, and that's going to be exciting. So it's great to be starting there again. New Zealand holds a important place in my heart, so it's great to be doing that. And then we'll be, in other countries, and we're also just going to be announcing a lot as far as just the other procedures we're doing, and then the autonomy features that we're building. We want to be we're going to have a lot. We put a few things out, but it's not been that active. It'll be a lot more active in the next few years. There's many exciting things that we're starting to work on that will come to the public at some point.
Nick, and I think what's really interesting is you guys are the first to do surgery via iPad. Is that right? And you're also the first to do like sort of semi-automated surgery in the world?
I think so. There's different ways you can define autonomous. People claim autonomous, but it's a lot of the time it's not like AI. It's like, you give it a predefined set of motions and then it does those things. So I think we're the first ones that are building autonomy in the way that we define it, which I think is a strong form of autonomy. There's a weaker form of autonomy that are in other products that are out there. And then the iPad thing. So yeah, I mean, that's something that we think is really going to be big here. And one problem with surgery and with robots in general is, and this is certainly the case for Da Vinci and others like that, the training is for the robot itself is really hard. So you may have a procedure that itself is hard to learn. Then you've got to learn the robotic part of it, which is also really challenging. So one thing with the iPad is it lets us launch an app to the App Store where you can do a simulated surgery with our controls and practice not just on our controls, but also on the procedure. So you can learn surgeries with this set of controls. And the natural thing to do would be to get one of our products to do it after that. But it's a great way to be able to train surgeons without having to actually bring a robot in and have them work on that, because robots are hard. It's learn firsthand how hard it is to move these things around and get them to New Zealand or somewhere else. It's not easy. So yeah, this is a much more better way to scale training and just help surgeons get their expert level much faster.
And when will this be coming to a hospital near you?
Well, it depends on the regulators. I mean, so as far as, do you mean the product's already out there in certain places? Yeah. I think when FDA clears it, we've got some centers that are very eager to get going with this already in the US. And we're talking to probably, I'd say, 30 centers very actively that seem really excited to get it. And there's a lot more we could be talking to, or we're bandwidth limited as a small company now. And so won't be long. I mean, I think we'll be in a lot of these places at some point next year, if not even end of this year. We'll see how it goes.
That's super exciting. That's awesome.
Yeah, amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really, really cool. And we look forward to all these updates in the next few months.
Thanks for having me. Great
Thanks, Nick.
to have this chat.
Thank you for tuning in to TechMates. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends. We'll be back soon with more stories of Kiwi and Aussie founders reshaping the future and disrupting down under. Until next time, keep dreaming big and daring to disrupt.